Hello and welcome to Visiting Dugout, a Fans First Sports Network production. I am Chrystal O'Keefe. I have friend of the pod, Kevin O'Brien, on to talk about the Royals. Kevin, would you like to just briefly maybe reintroduce yourself? It's been a little while.
Yeah, it has. Thanks for having me back on. And my name's Kevin O'Brien. I run the Royals Reporter website and blog at royalsreporter.com. I also write for Pitcher List, the Batter's Box column every week. And I also have started a new pod with my friend Jared Perkins. We talk about the Royals, the Crown Talk podcast, which drops typically every Monday, Tuesday night. So those are a couple of things I do. You can also find me at Blue Sky and Twitter and at Royal Report Kev, and I'm just glad to be here and talk some Royals and White Sox baseball.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So, what is new with the Royals this year?
So, it's a different year because this is a year with expectations, which is not something we can really say a lot as Royals fans. Typically, it's usually another season of rebuilding, but GM JJ Piccolo, who was promoted to the top spot back in 2023, helped build this team to make the playoffs last year for the first time since the 2015 World Series. The Royals made it to the American League Division Series, which they lost to the Yankees. So expectations were high. One of the biggest issues was trying to find a leadoff hitter, and they found it in Jonathan India as the Royals traded Brady Singer for Jonathan India, as well as Joey Wiemer, who's currently in AAA Omaha. And then they also acquired closer Carlos Estevez, who last played for the Phillies, to shore up the bullpen. It's been kind of a weird Royal season. The season kind of started off slow, especially on the offensive end. Bobby Witt Jr., the reigning AL MVP runner-up, has gotten off to a good start, but everybody else in the Royals lineup hasn't, except for today, because today they set a club record with 7 home runs against the Baltimore Orioles. So maybe things are turning around, but the Royals had a 6-game losing streak at one point in April. People were starting to panic. People were starting to think that, the Royals are going to go back to their basement of the AL Central ways, and then they've won 11 out of their last 13. So now we're in a much different boat as we return home to Kauffman for a homestand against the White Sox and then the Red Sox over the weekend.
So, knowing that there were much higher expectations this season, do you think they did a decent job in the offseason?
I think they did. And, it's, JJ Piccolo kind of talked about really 3 priorities. One priority was getting a leadoff man. He did it with Jonathan India. And then the second priority was shoring up the bullpen. They did that with Carlos Estevez, as well as kind of keeping some of their pitchers long-term, such as Cole Ragans and Michael Wacha. So they did re-sign Michael Wacha early on in the offseason. The only thing they didn't get done was getting a middle-of-the-order bat. The Royals were in on a lot of players this offseason. Jurickson Profar, Anthony Santander. There was rumors of possibly trying to get Starling Marte from the New York Mets. But, when it comes to these kind of transactions, it takes kind of 2 to tango. You can't force a player to sign in a place that he doesn't want to, and you can't force a team to trade if they don't want to. And so none of those deals really worked out. I know Randall Grichuk was another guy who was rumored to go to the Royals, and he decided to stay in Arizona. So they didn't really shore up that middle-of-the-order bat, and they've tried to go internal, and that has had mixed results. But again, today might have been a sign of things to come as they scored 11 runs against the Orioles, who were a playoff team last year.
Yeah, that Orioles turn this season has been very odd. I was kind of expecting them to still be really good, and they have not had a great start this year either. Which
Yeah,
blows
and
me away.
it was disappointing this series. I mean, it was a really fun game, but the Orioles pitching is just kind of a mess. Charlie Morton just looks kind of done at this point, which is kind of sad because he's been such a success story. But as a Royals fan, I'll take 2 of 3 against the Orioles in Baltimore.
Yeah, you do have another. You mentioned Starling, but you do have a former Mets player, one of my favorites, Mark Canha.
Yeah, so that was another one that we did sign. So Mark Canha initially signed with the Brewers on a minor league contract, did not make the team. And so when he asked for his outright release, the Royals came in and kind of swooped him up. He's been a pretty good bench bat. He did get hurt for a little bit. He collided with the wall on a fly ball, and that put him on the IL for a little bit. He's returned. He's great, has a great plate approach, which the Royals, they tend to be a little bit more free swinging. So his plate approach has been helpful. But he hasn't provided a whole lot of power, which is one of the reasons why he's not really playing every day. He's kind of playing more against left-handed starting pitchers.
Yeah, he's not going to be your power guy, that's for sure. Love him dearly, but that was one complaint I had when he was on the Mets.
Oh, yes.
So now that they're winning and they're getting these runs, do you feel a bit more confident heading into the season? I know April is such a weird time because you get that, I hate the cliche phrase sample size, but you're only getting that small amount. You're not really seeing what they're going to be up to. But now that it's May and now that they're starting to score some more runs, do you feel a little bit better with where you're going to land in the American League Central?
I think so. I mean, even when they were going through their losing streak, as you kind of said, these are such small sample sizes that you really can't judge it too quickly. I mean, we've seen teams like last year where we saw the Mets got off to a slow start, and we saw the Tigers really kind of have kind of a middling start, and then they kind of turned it on at the end. So you can't always just say, "Oh man, this was a bad 6-game stretch." But I do think the Royals, what they do well, they have a good pitching staff. They have a good rotation with a lot of depth. You look at their 1 through 5, with Cole Ragans and Seth Lugo, who were top 5 AL Cy Young finalists. And then you have Kris Bubic, who's had a breakout year, Michael Wacha, who's been a savvy veteran, and Michael Lorenzen, who had a tough day today, but he's been a really solid number 5. So the rotation depth is there. They still have Alec Marsh, who's injured right now, but also Noah Cameron, who made his MLB debut against the Baltimore Orioles. He had a no-hitter through 6 1/3 in his MLB debut, so they have some depth there. And Kyle Wright, who won over 20 games in 2022, is starting to come back from his injury. He's on a rehab start from AA. So the strength of the Royals remains pretty strong with the pitching staff and the bullpen, with having not just Estevez, but Lucas Urseg, who was a closer last year, as well as John Schreiber. And once Hunter Harvey returns off injury, then you have a really solid potential in the bullpen through 6 to 9 innings. The offense is going to be streaky. I think they're going to eventually upgrade at the deadline by acquiring a bat. But I think the pitching staff is going to get them through as the offense goes through these hot and cold streaks.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, we're going to take a quick little break, and then we'll come back and talk about some pitching matchups. All right. Welcome back. So I was so thankful half the time when I look at probable pitchers, they're not even up because I feel like I record too early, but we've got them. So first game, we've got Shane Smith versus Cole Ragan. Second, we've got Sean Burke with Seth Lugo. Third game, Jonathan Cannon and Michael Wacha. And then final game, Davis Martin and Kris Bubic. So I was looking at these ERAs too. These are, for the most part, pretty evenly matched competitors for pitching. So what can you tell me about what we might see from this rotation?
So the White Sox will be facing probably the heart of the Royals rotation, facing Ragans, Lugo, Wacha, and Bubic. Lorenzen is probably their worst starter right now, and he just went today. So the White Sox are going to be facing their top 4. Cole Ragans will be an interesting one. He wasn't put on the IL, but he missed his last start due to a groin injury. He had a couple starts ago with some cramping in that area. He only went 3 innings in his last start against the Rockies. They felt it wasn't bad enough to go on the IL, but that's something to watch out for, because if he's kind of struggling through that, his stuff doesn't play as well. And we saw that against the Rockies because he gave up a couple home runs. So the biggest one, I think that's going to be the toughest of that matchup, might be Seth Lugo, who's really been dealing after a slow start. He had 8 Ks in his last outing against Tampa Bay and 8 innings of work. What makes Seth Lugo so good is he has 10 pitches that he throws. So he has an arsenal where he throws 10 different pitches. So if you look at kind of his stuff metrics, no pitches really pop out except maybe for his curveball, but he's got 10 pitches. So it's kind of hard to own in on one pitch, because he can throw a variety of different offerings, and he throws them for strikes, which makes it very difficult. So I think that's going to be the most challenging matchup. Kris Bubic will also be another interesting matchup, since the White Sox pretty much only faced him in the bullpen last year. Now he's made the move to the rotation, and he was just named the Royals pitcher of the month for the month of April. So he's coming off a really great start to the year, and the White Sox might have their hands full with him, especially since they don't have as much familiarity with him like they do with Waka, Lugo, and Ragan, who they all faced last year.
Yeah, you guys are just missing he's very young, started in the bullpen. He pitched today, Bryce Wilson, because we lost Martin Perez.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking, and his ERA is under 2. It's at 1.98 right now. And I was like,
yes.
Well, that's not going to be a fun game to watch for the White Sox fans, but that's okay. But otherwise they were surprisingly evenly matched. And you'll see Jonathan Cannon, who just actually had 2 very great games in a row. So I'm kind of excited to see where he's headed as far as a starting pitcher for this team, because it's not always great.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think that the White Sox strength is definitely their pitching staff. I think the Royals have had a hard time with pitchers that they're not familiar with. That stemmed from last year. And obviously these are a lot of pitchers that the Royals are not familiar with. I mean, these are a lot of rookies, a lot of guys who only pitched sporadically last year. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they adjust. Because that's something that's kind of plagued the team the last couple of years, is when they face rookies that they don't have a lot of experience with, they tend to struggle.
That's fair. Yeah. And I mean, you see that all the time. There's always that joke, like they are making some unknown look like a Cy Young winner. But I think that's very, very valid for so many teams. So yeah, you raise a great point. So which player on the Royals do you think will be the biggest threat for the White Sox?
I think one guy that's really turning it on right now is Vinny Pasquantino. So Vinny Pasquantino got off to a slow start this year. If you look at his current numbers, he only has a 197 average and 638 OPS, but he's really been on a tear in the month of May. If you look at his stats in the month of May, he's hitting 316 with a 737 slugging and 1.053 OPS. Again, small sample size, but it kind of shows that he's starting to get comfortable and starting to hit. He had another home run today. He looks really comfortable in the box. Another guy that's been really surprising has been Maikel Garcia. So Maikel Garcia kind of had a rough year last year, sub 650 OPS, and he was one of the reasons why the Royals decided to go get Jonathan India to be the leadoff hitter. Since Garcia's come out of the leadoff, it looks like he's been able to tap more into his power. He has 4 home runs already this year, including 2 from today, and he's currently hitting 319 with an 875 OPS. So those are 2 hitters that we all know about Bobby Witt. Bobby Witt's kind of like I don't think White Sox fans need any introduction to him, but Maikel Garcia and Vinny Pasquantino are kind of 2 of their home developed guys that I think are really coming into their own this year, with Vinny really playing well since we hit May.
That's good. So with that, and I know you did just mention not being familiar with these young hitters, but what are the keys that they need to take this series?
For the White Sox or for the Royals?
Or for the Royals, like what do they need to do to actually take this whole series from them?
I think the Royals, one of the things that they have, I mean, the offense has struggled. Going in today, they ranked 28th in OPS and 28th in runs scored. There's been a lot of controversy in terms of their approach. At one point, they had the most first pitch. They had taken the most first pitch strikes in the league, and they kind of had a passive approach. I would say probably since the road trip, since they went to Tampa Bay, they have kind of changed that approach. We've seen a lot more of them swinging at first pitches and being more aggressive early in the count. And I think that's going to be really big, because I think with a team like the White Sox, the longer you let them hang around, the more chances they are going to beat you. I have a lot of friends here in Kansas City who are White Sox fans, so we talk about our teams all the time. And the White Sox, that we're seeing some guys that they're not as horrific as they were last year. They're still not very good, but there seems to be some life in this team. And so, you don't want to give them an opportunity to win a game or 2 in a series that's like, hey, we definitely should take. And especially with the Royals coming off the momentum, they've swept Tampa Bay. They won 2 of 3 in Baltimore. It can be really easy to overlook a team like the White Sox, especially with a weekend series coming up against the Red Sox. So I think a key for the Royals is being aggressive early in the count, not being too passive, especially against a young pitching staff. if you let the young pitching staff continue to get innings, then I think that's going to make it a lot harder for you to win.
Yeah, the White Sox have been coming back, and again, it's the Astros, and nobody but people in Houston seem to like the Astros. But they have been very scrappy. Yesterday was not a great example, but the day before they completely dominated the Astros, and I was like, where has this team been? And the night before they won, so they won 2 in a row. That is huge news for the White Sox. And today I kind of gave up on the game and said I'm just going to take a nap, and then it's delayed, but they're currently up a run in the 7th. So I'm like, okay, this is new. This is an interesting team to watch, because they're finally realizing, oh, I don't have to hit a home run, but I can still manufacture a run, and we're going to actually be a little pesky, because everybody kind of writes them off at this point, and that's fair to do. But yeah, it's been interesting to see them kind of come back and actually score some runs again. Refreshing.
Yeah.
With
and I
that,
know, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No.
Oh, no, sorry. I was going to say, I watched some of the game yesterday against Hunter Brown, and them scoring 3 runs in the first inning off Hunter Brown. So, I mean, like I said, it's, they show flashes, and the Royals weren't able to do that against Hunter Brown when Hunter Brown faced them last weekend. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's some scrappiness, and even though a lot of people write them off, I do feel like they have potential here. And as you're saying, they could perhaps take a series against Houston, which would be a huge momentum boost going into this series.
It's Chase. It's this new kid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, he was gone for about 10 games almost, and they were back to like the White Sox I know, just horrific. And then Chase is back again. I'm like, oh, never mind, they're winning. What is this, a run in this economy? What are we doing? Oh, it's this kid. I'm telling you, he's the second coming or something.
That's awesome.
So with that, what are the fears that you might have with this Royals team heading into this 4-game series with the White Sox?
Yeah, some of my fears is just, again, the offensive bats go cold. Again, we had scored 11 runs today, set up, a club record with 7 home runs in 1 game. And I think the fear is that the approach maybe gets away from them in these 4 games, and they probably give away a series. Because, this is Major League Baseball. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody can beat everybody. These are pro teams. So, you worry that they would lose a series that they should win because their hitting approach goes away. I think my also fear too is that Cole Ragan's, he's going tomorrow. He hasn't had to go on the IL, but you never know. Does he go pitch tomorrow, and maybe he goes on to the IL, and we don't know what his future will be. He's had 2 Tommy John surgeries. It's kind of a weird situation because it's not really like he had 2 Tommy John surgeries at separate times. He had a Tommy John surgery and it didn't go well, and so they had to have another one. So it's really more like a 1.5. I don't even know how you categorize Tommy John surgeries, but it's kind of like that. So my big worry is maybe something's wrong with Cole Ragan's and he gets hurt and then he's out for a long period of time. Obviously, the Royals have pitching depth. They still have Lugo and Waka, but Cole Ragan's is kind of the engine that kind of pumps everything for the rotation. And so I guess that's also a fear, is that the Royals lose him long-term during this series.
Yeah, that'd be a tough blow.
Mm-hmm.
So moving away from our respective teams, where are you at with this season so far? I mean, this is your hot takes, or just, what you've noticed, what you think could happen.
Yeah, I think the AL Central is still pretty wide open. Again, I know the Tigers have been the team that's kind of captured the attention of everybody, but you look at the Tigers, the Guardians, the Royals, and the Twins. I still think it's a pretty close race. I'm not willing to rule anybody out, even with the Twins 5 games under 500. I don't think the Central is as strong as it was in years past, but I do think that there's a potential to get 2 playoff teams in there at the end of the day. And then I just think, the NL West, I mean, I think the Colorado Rockies, I think they could push the 121 losses from the White Sox last year. They kind of seem like a mess organizational wise. I think Bud Black is just a manager who seems really checked out at this point. I mean, today I was watching the game against the Giants, and it was obvious that the player that he tagged, the Giants player, obviously dropped the ball, and Bud Black still challenged it. And I'm just kind of like, what are you guys doing? He dropped the ball. Like, why are you wasting a challenge? And it just kind of seems like Bud Black's like, yeah, well, whatever. So I just think there's a lot of parts of that's going on with the Rockies, and so for even though as bad as the White Sox were, I could see the Rockies surpass that. I get all the same vibes from the Rockies that I did from the White Sox last year.
And the Rockies, they've had some of the worst luck too. Especially,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chris Bryant. I feel like Chris Bryant was already kind of out to pasture, but with all of his injuries, they don't have anybody
Yeah.
left.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of rebuilding, and like we've known that the Rockies pitching staff has always been so bad, but you could always say, well, at least they're going to maximize their hitters, and they're really going all in with their youth movement on hitters, and they don't have the Charlie Blackmon anymore. Chris Bryant is hurt, and they don't have like a Trevor Story anymore, and that's kind of an issue because you have all these young guys, and you could tell that they're going to need some time for adjustment. And you got Ezekiel Tovar hurt; he's on the IL. Tyro Estrada, who's supposed to be a guy that was supposed to give him a boost, he's been on the IL. So yeah, it just kind of seems like they don't have a lot of depth, and they're really getting exposed. And you're in one of the toughest divisions in baseball. I mean, the Giants are good, the Dodgers are good, the Padres are good, the Diamondbacks are good. So thankfully, they don't play the old schedule where they played more in the division. Because if they did play more in the division, I think they definitely would be taking that 121 losses out to pasture. That's how tough that division is.
Yeah. So, who do you think is going to really make it super far this season? Do you have any idea yet?
I don't, but I mean, I think some of the teams that you kind of have to you kind of have to like what I mean, what the Yankees are doing as always. I mean, Aaron Judge is continuing to be a sensational hitter. The rest of the division is just kind of meh, especially with the Orioles not doing so hot. Obviously, another team obviously you look at is the Mets. They're 22-12. Pete Alonso has looked really rejuvenated, and they haven't really gotten like much from Juan Soto, or at least not what they expected. So you imagine Juan Soto is going to turn it around, and so the Mets definitely seem like they're really primed for a big run. But other than that, I think it's going to be a battle of who stays healthy. Right now, like the NL West, it's a dogfight. I mean, with the Padres and the Dodgers and the Giants. I mean, the Giants have always been a fun team.
Mm-hmm.
I have family that's still in the Bay Area, and I grew up initially a Giants fan until I moved to Kansas City, and so this is probably the most hopeful that I've heard my family be about the Giants in a while. And
Yeah.
so they've been a fun team to watch. With Willie Adames and Jung Ho Lee staying healthy. So they could make a run, and because once they get to the playoffs, Giants fans are great, and I think they can really boost when they have a good team around them. They just haven't had a great team around them, so they've been kind of overshadowed by the Dodgers, unfortunately, the last few years.
Yeah, the Giants have always been one of my quiet favorites. Like, you're not going to see me very actively rooting for the Giants, but if I had to pick a team in California, they'd be it because I was I mean, Tim Lincecum and I are, I think, 2 years apart in age. I grew up in like that prime time of him and the Giants just being so good and him being like the best pitcher in baseball. So I used to watch a lot of Giants games growing up.
Yeah. So yeah, they have a great fan base. Like I said, it's they don't get a lot of credit because the Warriors being so good now, and obviously like with the 49ers, but you go in San Francisco or downtown San Francisco, like during baseball season, you see a lot of people with Giants hats. The culture around there is really fun. And it's a great stadium, and I think people are just really into the Giants when they're good. And so, like again, like now that they're really good, it's like I'm seeing packed houses again at Oracle Park, which is something I haven't seen in the last couple of years. So I don't know. I think this might be a year where the Giants can surprise.
Also, Oracle Park is very underrated. I
Oh,
had a wonderful time there. It's a gorgeous ballpark, right? It's freezing. I was not expecting to be so cold, but that was on me. But it's gorgeous park.
it really is. I took my wife and I went to because I'm from there, so I've been there quite a bit, and I even went there when the old Candlestick. And so my wife and I went a couple years ago. It was her first time, and it's such like a foodie ballpark. Like if you're like a foodie or just you like nice alcohol or whatever, it's just like, oh man, this is just more, and which I think is such a characteristic of San Francisco. That's why I think it just really reflects the city and the diversity of the community of San Francisco. So that's another reason why I like it so much. It's just like this feels like I'm in San Francisco. It's not like you go somewhere and, I mean, nothing against St. Louis. I think St. Louis ballpark is really great, and it's a really fun time. But the whole ballpark village feels very synthetic, and it's just kind of like, this is just kind of part of the ballpark village atmosphere. While in San Francisco, it kind of feels like, well, this is part of like a San Francisco atmosphere, and this is what it means to be like in the Bay Area. So yeah, she really was floored by it. And so yeah, and then obviously the views, you can't beat those views by the bay.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I went for like the now infamous Pelican game where there was a random pelican on the field that they kind of had to like halt the game, and then it ended up in this like little kid, like right by where the Coke bottle slide is. There's like this little kids area for them to kind of run around and play, and it ended up landing in there and sat there for probably 20 minutes. So they had to close off this area, and all these kids were just standing outside like giving these death glares to this poor pelican. But I took pictures and it was wonderful, but it made it like I was looking towards the end of the year, and it made it onto some like top 10 list of
really
animal interruptions or something for the MLB account. And I was like, oh, I was there. All right. Well, that's what I've got for you. So obviously, thank you again for coming on. It's always a pleasure hearing from you.
Yeah. And thank you again for having me on. And I look forward to a fun series for the next 4 days.
Yeah. Best of luck, obviously, in this series. And we'll chat again later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.